So, this morning, I want to talk to you about something that happened to me last week. Bryce, or as I've affectionately come to refer to him as, intern, came up to me and said, "Hey, I need you to come to my Eagle Scout board review." And I went, "That is amazing." I have no idea what that is. Absolutely no clue what that is. That was my first thought. But my second thought was, wait a second. I mess with you regularly. I make comments and evaluate you every day in an unofficial capacity. And so now you're wanting me to do it officially. Sign me up. And so with that, last Tuesday, he told me to come to such and such location, and I showed up, and we had what I would call a meeting, interview, evaluation, and interrogation all wrapped up into one. During this hour, some Boy Scout members, some leaders, were asking him different questions about Boy Scout principles. They were asking him about his Eagle Project. And without going into too much depth, because frankly, I don't know much about it, being an Eagle Scout is being completed. You have finished this Boy Scout program, and now you can say you have moved on and you know all there is to know about being a scout. And so during the course of this interview, they were asking him questions about the scout law and the scout code. They were asking him how his project went, and they're asking him all these different things. And for those who are curious, a scout is to be trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. And he quoted that without a paper like I did just now. And at the end of this review, one of the guys in there mentioned that this is for life. He said, as an Eagle Scout, what's going to happen is you have already shown these qualities, but people are going to expect that going forward. You're going to be called on to show these kinds of things throughout your life because you're an eagle, as it were. It means you have done this and you will be called on again to do it. And at that moment, I couldn't help but think about the expectations that our God has for us. Do we answer God's call in the same way? Do we choose to answer the request of God? You know, in Galatians chapter 5, Paul shows a list of qualities which kind of remind me of this kind of scout law, the scout code, as it were. It's the fruit of the Spirit. See, as Christians, we should show love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. We have a bit of a song about that, and we also have a verse there in Galatians chapter 5 where Paul says, against these things there is no law, so do them. And if you take a look at the list, there's a lot of good things on either one of them, right? And there's a lot of overlap, but I want to highlight one particular overlap. Kindness. And I got to thinking about it. I got to thinking, when you think about this quality or this fruit of the Spirit, do we show godly qualities like kindness in our lives? God's desire is that we show these godly qualities. God's desire is that we show kindness. Kindness like David. You know, a man after God's own heart, he took the code of God rather seriously. Not that he didn't make mistakes, but he desired to do the will of God. You see, David in 2 Samuel chapter 9 had an opportunity to just be kind. And if nothing else today, I want us to think about those three words because it's a rather safe thing to bet on. If nothing else, we can just be kind and it will benefit the relationships we have with those around us. And I'd like to explore David's decision to just be kind in a second. But before we look at that, we should consider David's past. Who was David? I mean, he's been a rather busy guy all of his life, right? He was known probably the most famously for his fight with David and Goliath. I'd say that's one of the more well-known stories about David. And if you've heard of David the king, you've probably heard that story. But in 2 Samuel 9, David is no longer the shepherd boy. He's no longer the sling-wielding young man. He is, in fact, the king who has defeated so many different enemies in his life. And in fact, the previous chapter, 2 Samuel 8, kind of shows all of his different successes, his different conquests. He has managed to let his friends outnumber his enemies for once in his life. And he's now getting tribute from these surrounding nations. It's a lot of tribute. He is finally at a point where he's beaten the Moabites, he's beaten the Philistines, he's forced the enemy nations to become servants. He is now well off. He has space to breathe. And the question is, what did he use that space to breathe for? What would you use it for? If you've had turmoil your entire life, if every waking moment you couldn't really breathe, you were so busy, and then all of a sudden people told you, hey, you now get to relax for a little while. Wouldn't that sound nice, right? What would you use it for? What would you decide to do? You see, David chooses to use this time to search for someone to be kind to. It's an odd thing to consider, but look at 2 Samuel 9, verse 1, where David says, "Is there yet anyone left of the house of Saul that I may show him kindness for Jonathan's sake?" A few verses later, after a servant named Ziba is brought to David, David again asks it in verse 3. It says, "And the king said, 'Is there not still someone of the house of Saul that I may show the kindness of God to him?' Ziba said to the king, 'There is still a son of Jonathan. He is crippled in both feet.'" And so there is, in fact, an opportunity for David. At this point in his life, there is someone to be kind to. And as you continue reading, you find out it's a man by the name of Mephibosheth. And he was found and brought to the king. Who is he? He is the son of Jonathan, but by extension, that means he is the grandson of Saul the king. But now, he doesn't really have position in Israel. David was looking for a guy like this, someone that he could show kindness to, and he was searching for the opportunity. He didn't have to. It would have been so easy for David to say, you know what, my life has been a wreck. I'm finally at peace now. It's time to look after me now that I've got a break. And yet he didn't. He chose instead to just be kind. And as followers of Jesus Christ, we should be looking for opportunities all the time to be kind. Many times in our lives, we actually miss those opportunities. Now, sometimes we genuinely miss them, that's true, but many times we don't really look because it's easier. Or, sadly, sometimes we avoid taking those opportunities because we don't really want to get involved. You know, I'm reminded of Jesus whenever he interacted with other people. He took an opportunity to look for places that he could meet the needs of others. He looked for opportunities where he could serve, where he could love, where he could show kindness to those around him. And I noticed something: if we look for opportunities to be kind, God will help you find them. As a Christian, I'd encourage us to seek out ways to be kind. Perhaps it's a stranger in need, or maybe it's a church member in pain. I mean, it's sad to say, but it is absolutely true. Life is not perfect. And with that heartache comes a church family that can look for opportunities to build one another up. Let's look for ways to respond kindly when people talk to us in a not so kind way. That happens, right? You know, you have someone that takes a shot at you. What's the easy thing to do? Jab back. That is incredibly easy to do because it feels natural, it feels easy, and it feels like it's the just thing to do. You hit me, I want to hit you back. And yet, the hard thing to do is to choose to be kind in that situation. And if we look for an opportunity to be kind in that moment, you'll find it. And you'll be blessed if you respond as Jesus would respond. So just look for opportunities to be kind. So back to David. What did King David do in response to hearing about Mephibosheth's situation? As king, he could have just stopped there, right? He could have looked for someone to be kind to. He could have immediately then said, hey, that's really rough. I am so sorry for you. As some of the teens would say, bummer. Right? And then he could have stopped there. In fact, our politicians have a bad habit of doing that right there. Press releases, public statements, Twitter posts, but no action. Because it's so much easier to make a comment and do nothing. But David didn't do that. He chose to be kind, and he actually chose to show and tell. Don't just tell how kind you want to be and how sorry you are for that person's situation, but show them you care. Show them the love of Jesus Christ and actually be kind. So what did David say? He said, don't worry, which is really weird given Mephibosheth's situation, right? Think about it for just a moment. The grandson of Saul, but crippled in both feet, he's lost everything. He was royalty by definition, or he would have been, and yet no more. He's no longer on the kingly line. Saul made sure of that, choosing to go against God. He can't walk or support himself, and if you can't do that, you can't eat. His family is dead. He no longer has an inheritance. Life as this man knows it is over. Never to be the same. And yet, David looks at this man and he says, do not fear. It says there in 2 Samuel 9, verse 7, it says, and David said to him, do not fear, for I will show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan, and I will restore to you all the land of Saul your father, and you shall eat at my table always. Notice what David is doing for this guy. He is restoring his house. He's given a table to eat. He's providing for him. The inheritance that he lost, it's his again. He easily could have went hungry. Never again. And for that matter, whose table is he eating at? The king's. So he's not just going to have a place to grab a bite. He's going to sit at the highest table in the land from now on. You will never go hungry again. And in the next few verses, verses 9 and 10, it's told that everything will be given to Mephibosheth, and the servants of his grandfather and father will be given to him. He turns to the servants of Saul and he says, hey, you're serving this guy now. David has shown amazing kindness to this man. He then acted on it to change this man's life. He made sure that he was taken care of, especially when he could have just said a few words and moved on with his day. But instead, he acted kind. He acted like a follower of God. And as Christians, we should be in the business of that. We should be acting like followers of God, actually showing the kindness, don't just tell. So often we struggle with acting on the kindness that God desires from us. So we just stop with a word or a thought. We move about our day. And after all, I've given my due diligence. I've checked on them. I've said, hey, how are you? And when they said fine, despite the tear or two falling from their face, we went, okay, cool. I'm going to move on to the next person. It's efficient. It's quick. It's easy. And yet there's a gap there. Part of being kind is acting out your kindness. We have different names for it, though, right? We show love. We serve others. We care about those that are around us, and we do something about it. Think about Jesus for just a second. Imagine if the only thing he did was just say a few words. Now, his words were amazing. They were phenomenal. They were eternity-changing words, but he always backed them up with action that showed what he was talking about was true and that he loved those around him. Can people tell that about you? That you're kind? Or, on the flip side, would they be surprised that you treat others with kindness? Part of just being kind is to show and tell. Live it out for Jesus and for others, just like David did. And if you think about David again for a second, he gave him, Mephibosheth, an amazing gift. But I want to reiterate what I said earlier. He did not have to do that. Now, he had some responsibility. He had a relationship with that family, right? But at first, it wasn't good. Think about, for a second, the relationship David had with Saul. Started out all right, and then it got progressively worse as time went on. You see, despite David being effective for Saul and for God, fighting for Saul in his army, Saul was angry and jealous towards David. Take a look at 1 Samuel 18, verse 8, where it says, "And Saul was very angry, and this saying displeased him. He said, 'They have ascribed to David 10,000s, and to me they have ascribed thousands. And what more can he have but the kingdom?'" Saul started to get paranoid. He started to get jealous. He started to get angry. He started to hate David, and their relationship was strained in a variety of ways. If you think about some of the interactions they had, David was playing the harp, trying to soothe Saul, and all of a sudden Saul said, "You know what? I bet I could pin him to the wall with a spear." Not exactly the most normal interaction you'd think about, right? Saul tried to kill him. He tried to kill him in 1 Samuel 18, 10 through 16, and again in 1 Samuel 19, 9 and 10. A little bit later on, he offered his daughter to David. You might think, what's wrong with that? Well, the only purpose was to ensnare and entrap him. Not exactly helpful to David. He made him a leader in the army. Why? Not because he was a great leader and fighter, as he was, but so hopefully he could get killed. And eventually he drove him to be on the run and go into hiding. And it was during that time that David responded well to Saul. There were a couple of situations, one in 1 Samuel 24, where Saul was relieving himself in a cave where David and his crew were hiding out, and he could have ended the problem right there, but David said absolutely not. So what he did was he cut a piece of the robe off, and after Saul left, he goes, "Hey, by the way, I spared your life." A couple chapters later, in 1 Samuel 26, Saul was sleeping, and David told his soldiers, "Do not touch the man." They wanted to end the problem right there. And as someone trying to see into the mind of that person, it kind of makes sense, right? You've been following David around. We've been in hiding forever. Food's probably not great. Living conditions aren't that great given the fact that they've been in caves. If I kill this guy, this journey in the wilderness is over. Let me just do David a favor and by extension get me back to my bed. And David said, "No. Do not harm the Lord's anointed." And instead they took a water jug. He had almost every reason in the world to say, "Forget it." He had almost every reason except for one. He made a promise. He made a promise to Jonathan. Interestingly, this actually came up on accident in class today, not planned. 1 Samuel 20, verse 42. "Then Jonathan said to David, 'Go in peace, because we have sworn both of us in the name of the Lord, saying, the Lord shall be between me and you, and between my offspring and your offspring forever.' He rose and departed, and Jonathan went into the city." And he also promised Saul as well. He said, "Swear to me, therefore, by the Lord, that you will not cut off my offspring after me, and that you will not destroy my name out of my father's house." So the house of Saul would be connected with David's forever. They'd have a connection. And yet, I go back to that idea of David being the king. It's one thing to listen to a promise that you're really struggling with when you have to. It's a complete other when you're the king of a nation. After all the horrible things Saul did, and David even spared him, it would have been so easy for David to forget the promise. Instead of using his power to forget, he used it to be kind. Even after he struggled with Saul, even after he considered David, even after he was considered David's enemy and tried to kill him, even if he could have rationalized the kindness away, he chose to show kindness to Saul and his family. For Jonathan, it's easy. And we probably know a few Jonathans in our lives, right? Those that we love dearly, those that we care about so much. It's easy to be kind to those that we care about. But what about kindness to the Sauls in your life? Now, as far as I know, no one in here has been pinned to a wall with a spear, but I think you get what I'm saying. Those that hate us, those that cause us pain, those that when they walk into the room, you go, oh me. What about kindness to those individuals? How far do you take it, is my question. How far can you take the kindness? And to that, I want to share a story. I heard this story a while back. It was about a woman in her 70s in South Africa. So before Nelson Mandela, a lot of horrible things were reported in South Africa, and the people had demanded justice for all this wrongdoing. And Mandela came up with something called a Truth and Reconciliation meeting, which, regardless of how you feel about that, it was an attempt to keep things out of the official court system. And the way it worked is someone could come forward, they could make an accusation, the person could admit to what they had done, and they could decide on a course of reconciliation to make things right. And in a small village, a woman came forward and accused one of the officers of taking her husband and killing him, and taking her son and killing him, and the officer burned the bodies. And he said, yes, I showed up to their door, and I said, the husband's coming with me, and yes, I did do that. It was at that point that she turned to the arbiter, and she said, I have some requests. First, I want him to take me to where the bodies were burned. I want some of the dirt. I want closure. I want to be able to have a ceremony. But then she also said, and I want him to be my son. What? She said, every Friday, my husband and my son would come to the dinner table and talk about their day, and we would share what happened during the week. He took that from me, and so my request is that he comes to my house on Fridays where I feed him a meal and we talk about our day. And he shares with me his week. Now, the way the story goes is he was so overcome by the forgiveness, by the mercy, by the kindness that he passed out on the spot. That's how the story goes. And my question is, how far did she take the kindness, even though she was within her rights to throw kindness out the window? She was within her rights to throw mercy out the window. How far did Jesus take kindness? To what lengths did the Lord show his kindness? He helped others, he fed them, he served them, he met their needs, and he died for them. Now, correction, he died for us. Quite literally, he showed kindness to the ones who killed him. When he washed the feet of the disciples, Judas would have been there. As Christians, we can choose to be kind, and that can be rather hard. It can be easy. I love being kind to those that are Jonathans in my life. But to be kind to the one that would kill me, that would hurt me, to talk about behind my back, or, for that matter, to my face, that's rough. And yet, that's what being a Christian is all about. Resisting what is easy and natural for us and instead doing what God calls us to do. And in this case, it's to just be kind. But why does it even matter? Why does it matter that we should look to be kind even when hurt? Why should I make a special effort to respond to others in kindness, even if I discover that they would never do that for me? Because of God. When you think about the kindness that David was showing Mephibosheth, it was God's, right? David gave the kindness of God to him. He sought a man without hope to give grace and mercy to. He looked for someone to take care of, and he said, "Do not fear." And God has done the same thing for us. Romans 5, verse 8, but God demonstrates his own love toward us in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. While we were separated from him, while we were at the absolute lowest of our lives, after we realized there is no hope, there's no inheritance, we're not getting at the king's table, God looked at us and said, "Do not fear." And that's a really comforting thing to me. God showed us the ultimate kindness through his Son. And I think that Paul words it rather beautifully in Ephesians 4, verse 32, where it says, "Be kind to one another, tenderhearted, forgiving one another, as God in Christ forgave you." Why are we kind? Why do we show it? Why do we care about others, love others? Because God did it to us first. That's why we are to just be kind. And it should be visible every day of our lives. So in a few moments, we're going to sing a song, but I want you to think about your life for a second. Do you struggle with kindness? Or maybe you've hurt someone by not being kind. Maybe you've been hurt and your natural response is, "Well, I'm never going to be kind to that guy again. I see what it can get me." And yet Jesus wants us to be kind. Maybe you need the prayers of the church to help get back on track. You can come up front, or our elders will be in the back for a more private prayer. We're happy to help you with that, and there is no better place to get back on track. Or maybe you're finally realizing that God was kind first when he sent his Son on the cross, and you'd like to be in Christ. You'd like to embrace his kindness, as it were, and be baptized into Christ for the remission of your sins. If you haven't become a Christian yet, we'd love to help you with that too. Whatever you need, please come as we sing together.
Let every heart rejoice and sing. Let choral anthems rise. Hidden men and children bring to God your sacrifice. For he is good, the Lord is good, and kind are all his ways. With song and honor sounding loud, the Lord Jehovah praise. While the rocks and the rills, while the vales and the hills, a glorious anthem raise. Let each prolong the grateful song and the God of our fathers praise. And the God of our fathers praise. He bids the sun to rise and set. In heaven his power is known. And earth the dew to him shall yet bow low before his throne. For he is good.